Joining us from New York is Mr. Laolu Akonde, former presidential aide and host of Inside Sources right here on Channels Television. Good morning, Laolu.
Good morning, Kayla. Good to see you.
Good to see you. All right. So when we saw that speech from the vice president, it felt, well, from the president, President Bola Tinubu, that speech was read by the vice president. It felt a little harsh, harsher than previous speeches that we've given. What do you make of the tone of that speech, given Nigeria's stand on issues?
Well, I mean, I would suspect that the tone of which you speak might be a clear indication of the president's personal attitude to the United Nations. And in my view, and this is my personal view, that may explain the fact that he has missed the United Nations General Assembly back-to-back for 2 sessions now. So the tone might be, the proof that he is not satisfied, with the way multilateralism is being conducted, particularly and possibly in the United Nations. That's the only theory that I can say regarding the tone. But having said that, it is indeed an issue that is burning in the international system, the efficacy of the United Nations, especially since the Charter of the UN said that UN ought to prevent wars. As a matter of fact, UN was set up to prevent wars, but now we have wars all over the place. We have war in Ukraine, we have war in Gaza, in South Sudan, and these questions are being raised as to the efficacy of the current multilateral system, especially again also when you have different kinds of models of multilateralism, and also the issue of people emphasizing on their own national identity and their nationalism, as against working as a United Nations. Indeed. Of course, if you heard what the President of the United States also said, the President of the United States, Mr. Trump, also questioned the purpose of the UN and even went to the extent of saying that he has been able to do much more than the UN, and complained bitterly, about the fact that he doesn't get support from the UN, referencing what also happened to him on the elevator and what happened to his teleprompter. So so there are a lot of concerns out there about the UN itself as an institution. But I think I think it was Professor Gambari that said it, that if we didn't have the UN, we would have had to invent the UN, because we actually need a body where these things are being discussed actively.
Yeah, well, that's the issue, though, Laolu, the discussions. Yeah. And I want to read part of what the president said. We do not believe that the sanctity of human life should be trapped in the corridors of endless debate. It does feel, in many ways, that the debates are endless. And, of course, just to get your thoughts on this, we have made a stand. Well, we have always had this stand, but, more boldly written down now than I've ever seen before. That is why we, referring to Nigerians, we say without stuttering and without doubt that a 2-state solution remains the most dignified path to lasting peace for the people of Palestine. So we have taken a stand on that. So just so you can speak to us a little bit about the issue about these endless debates. And while the debates are going on, wars are going on, and then also this whole situation where we have said that we want a 2-state solution for the issue in Palestine.
Well, it's a very important issue, and I think there's quite a bit of frustration, about the situation in the international system, especially with regard to what the president of Nigeria described as the weight of moral conflict regarding the Israeli-Gaza conflict war, and some of the atrocities that the world has witnessed, and everybody knows the forces behind, the fact that that situation is persisting. The General Assembly is very clear about the two-state solution. Nigeria supports this two-state solution. And interestingly, I think earlier this week, you have quite a number of Western countries, Canada, United Kingdom, saying that, look, we recognize the state of Palestine. That's a very major shift in the whole in the whole argument. So yes, Nigeria has also affirmed its own position. Nigeria has always also supported the two-state solution, by the way, and the president's speech also made it very clear that that is still the position of Nigeria, and that is still the right way to go. Clearly, the world has been holding quite a very troubling situation in Gaza. And we hope that, after the end or during this debate, we can see a little bit more of resolution of it. I think even in the speech of the president of France, he called out President Trump to say that, look, you can stop the killings, you can stop the war in Gaza, and it is true, and it was very specific. I said, look, all you need to do, Mr. Trump, is to stop supplying Israel with the weapons with which they fight, which some other Western countries have done. So, I think you're right. Nigeria was bold enough in that presidential speech to say that, look, we support the two-state solution. It seems to be the reasonable way to go.
I mean, the tone ought to have been celebratory. After all, the United Nations is 80. But it does appear that it was one more of reflection, for a number of the leaders who spoke. And, looking at whether or not the UN was actually achieving its purpose, for me, it was just a question of taking a look at what some of the leaders were saying. And it was like as if they expected the UN to act by itself without their actual countries, taking the decisions which ought to be taken at the UN and backing it with their sovereign weight. Did you see an attempt to shift responsibility in this regard?
That's a very good point, Markwe. Excellent point. And this was some of the things that Mrs. Amina Mohammed had raised in our chat. That, look, I mean, it is the United Nations, member nations that form the United Nations, and the secretariats, and those agencies are the instruments of the United Nations. And she had said that clearly the UN is still a very, very important institution, that if we don't have the UN, we're going to have a situation where a lot of atrocities will be going unreported, and global focus will be shifted away from what is going on. And so she argued that, look, whatever it is, we know what is happening, and that is very important because that itself is a form of pushback, But you are right, Markwe, that the UN is made up of member nations. The Secretariat has no powers of its own outside of often raising the moral voice, which the Secretary General Antonio Guterres has actually been even criticized for. Guterres has managed to raise a moral voice, especially on what is happening in Gaza and Ukraine. And that is the best that the Secretariat by itself can do. It is the member nations, especially on security issues, the United Nations Security Council, where some of these heavy weights can actually be lifted. But if you have countries, such as the United States, using the veto, for instance, on the issue of the two-state solution and other stuff, it's going to be difficult to move forward. Even just ending the war, just creating an humanitarian access to Gaza has become such a very contentious issue. So we're talking about humanitarian access, and so we are witnessing some of the most tremendously atrocious stuff happening in our world today. And so it is the member nations of the United Nations that has the responsibility to sort it out. The Secretariat is only the instrument that they use.
Indeed, because at some point I started to ask if members, if the presidents who were given this debate had forgotten how the UN is supposed to work, if they thought that the UN was some institution that they had created which could just do what it liked, regardless of what it was they were doing outside of the UN. And even you just made reference to the veto powers of the Big Five, which they have refused to share with anyone else. And there are big questions as to whether or not that veto power will continue to exist because, looking at how effective it has been within the UN Security Council, it was given for a reason, clearly not for how it is currently being used, at least in the circumstances that we're seeing. Has there been any conversation or has any leader so far raised question? Because what it would seem is that all of the leaders, are the ones who are outside of the UN Security Council, are saying, no, we need a seat here, or we can, maybe they too should also have veto power. Is anybody saying that, look, maybe we shouldn't have this at all?
Oh, well, so as you know, that, the United Nations is a power, there are tremendous power dynamics, even in the formation of the United Nations, so those who formed the United Nations, those who had the ACs when the United Nations was formed, those are the people who have given themselves the power, to run the organization as the way they seem fit, including that power of the veto that the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, have. Now, what is happening is not so much a call to take away those powers. That would be much, much difficult. What is happening is that people are saying, including the Secretary General of the United Nations, including President Tinubu's speech, including the speech of the South African president, and quite a few others, are saying that, look, let us put 2 Africans on the Security Council and let them also have the veto power. Let them have all the powers and all the rights that the permanent 5 also has. And it's quite very absurd that Africa is the only continent that is not represented in the Security Council as a permanent member. And this is a debate that has gone on forever. But good thing, people like Antonio Guterres, and the Deputy Secretary General, our own sister Amina Mohamed, have also, raised the voices that we need to put 2 permanent members on the Security Council from Africa. So that is the conversation that people are saying that, okay, if we can't take away your power, then let us share it. And that seems to be a very reasonable thing. And I want to believe that ultimately this will happen because the member nations of the United Nations, owe it to ensure that the UN does not lose its reputation, does not lose the global trust that is in it, and it's up to the member nations to ensure that does not happen.
All right, Mr. Laulu, as we round up, just 2 things I want you to address. The first one being our appeal to be permanent members on the Security Council. Was this the appeal that would get us that particular thing that we're asking for? And then secondly, our stand, the 2-state solution that we've agreed on, or at least the president has said we've agreed on. Would that have any impact on our relationship with Israel and with the United Nations, with the United States of America, rather, because we know where they stand on that situation?
Yeah, well, to be fair to the Americans, they have made efforts in the past, and I don't think they have argued against the 2-state solution. I recall that President Clinton, almost got the PLO to agree, when he was president, and there has been other efforts by other American presidents, including this one. The problem is that is the ongoing conflict, and the fact that they will want to do it at a time when the Israelis are also comfortable, about that. What seems to be their predisposition now is Mr. Netanyahu's decision and resolve to destroy Hamas. And you wouldn't blame that resolve by itself in principle, because clearly Hamas has conducted itself as a a terrorist organization, and there is no doubt about the fact that Hamas is committed to the destruction of Israel. I don't think anybody is arguing that. They want to destroy Israel. That is a very clear, so you understand where Netanyahu is coming from. Now, what people are worried about Netanyahu is the excessive use of force and the atrocious, conditions that he has imposed in Gaza. So, yeah, Nigeria has joined the voice to say, reaffirm its voice that yes, it's a two-state solution, and most member states of the UN, that is where they are. Currently.
But, yes or no, do you think that this would have an impact on our relationship with the United States and with Israel because of our strong ties over the years? Will this stand that we've made, will it impact that?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Not in the big picture. There may be few things here and there, but essentially it would not rupture our relations with.
Mr. Laulu Akonde, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Laulu Akonde, the former presidential aide and presenter of Inside Sources right here on Channels Television. Thanks for your insights again.
Thank you very much.